White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on X, in which she said President Trump monitored the situation overnight at Mar-a-Lago alongside members of his national security team. The president spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu by phone. Prior to the attack, Secretary Rubio called all members of the Gang of Eight to provide congressional notification, and he was able to reach and brief 7 of the 8 members. The president and his national security team will continue to closely monitor the situation throughout the day. Joining me now is the Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts. Congressman Moulton serves on the Armed Services Committee, and he was a Marine Corps officer in Iraq. Congressman Moulton, thank you for joining us. Your take on what has happened in the last few hours.
I mean, this is illegal, it's unauthorized, it's unconstitutional, and we don't know what the plan is. So the president is putting thousands of American lives at risk for results that we can't even understand. And I'll tell you, as someone who was on the ground in Iraq and felt like I was repeatedly lied to by the Bush administration about what we were doing there, why we were going to war, I have to imagine that there are a lot of troops in the Middle East asking those same questions today. What are we being told the truth about? And is this just another bunch of lies?
And there are a lot of troops in the Middle East. I think it's not something Americans always realize, but we are talking about double-digit thousands of troops in the United States in that area. And then this issue of what we could be getting into. There is a fear that sometimes this administration sees wars as sort of remote control video game wars. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Iraq plus Afghanistan plus Venezuela. This is a massive 93 million person country that is heavily industrialized and fortified.
That's right. I mean, I remember being in Iraq thinking, wow, this is bad, but thank God the administration is learning their lesson and we're not going to go to Iran. People said that 20 years ago because Iraq was such a mistake. And it's worth remembering just how things started. We thought Iraq was going to be easy. We thought it was going to be like the Persian Gulf War, over in a matter of weeks. Obviously, that was very far from true. And the fundamental problems with Iraq, I mean, let me tell you, there were a lot. But the fundamental problems were, number one, the entire war was based on a lie about nuclear weapons. And number two, there was no plan for the day after. Well, we obviously know that Trump completely lied about obliterating Iran's nuclear weapons program, because here we are attacking it just months later. And on the second point, there's clearly no plan for the day after. I mean, he's just got a bunch of people he's saying to, well, hope you go out in the streets and protest and overthrow your regime when the bombs are done. Bombs and bluster is not a strategy.
This is an interesting point you make, because there are a lot of Americans who can get behind the idea that the Iranian regime is torturous and abusive and murderous and dictatorial, all the things. But Donald Trump did say to them many weeks ago, go out there, we've got your back. He said in the State of the Union that he would support the protesters. And then today he said, go and take control of your government. This is the best chance you're ever going to get. He said this about 8 hours ago. Again, it's not clear what they're supposed to rise up and do exactly.
No, that's exactly right. And let's be clear about just, again, how we got here. Trump said that he would stop the Iranian regime from killing its own people. I mean, as a side note, he didn't seem to care about his own administration killing our own people in Minneapolis. But nonetheless, he said, okay, we're not going to let the Iranian regime kill its own people. We're going to send an armada there. But the reason that the armada was not there to actually stop the killings when they happened a few weeks ago was because it was in Venezuela, which is not in our national security interest. And now he says, well, we need to conduct these strikes because we are not able to get a nuclear deal. I want a nuclear deal to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Well, he had that. He had that, a deal that unequivocally said Iran can never develop a nuclear weapon. And he tore it up in his first term. And not only did he tear up that diplomatic deal, the same thing he says he wants today, but as a result of that, we lost our eyes on the Iranian nuclear program. We used to have inspectors, cameras, keeping an eye on exactly what they were doing. So if they ever violated the agreement that Obama put in place, we would know that we had to do something. All of that is gone today. So the president has gotten us into a far worse situation than we've had from the beginning. And yes, we can agree that the Iranian regime is terrible. Okay, Trump, then stop making all these mistakes that empower the regime.
President Trump receiving pushback this morning for carrying out strikes against Iran without authorization from Congress. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky condemned it as, quote, acts of war unauthorized by Congress. Senator Mark Warner, the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said that not only did Trump act beyond his presidential authority, but he's put American lives at risk. Warner wrote in a statement, quote, how does this make America safer? By the president's own words, American heroes may be lost. That alone should have demanded the highest level of scrutiny, deliberation, and accountability, yet the president moved forward without seeking congressional authorization. The Constitution is clear. The decision to take this nation to war rests with Congress and launching large-scale military operations, end quote. The Constitution, by the way, does say that only Congress can declare war. The president used the term war in his overnight remarks. But both Republican and Democratic presidents have ordered military force without Congress's authorization over the years. The authorization is typically in the form of an authorization of military force. That's an AUMF. It's a joint resolution passed by Congress which allows the president to deploy military force. A landmark AUMF was granted back in 2001 in response to the 9/11 attacks. The Trump administration has relied on broad interpretations of that 2001 AUMF to justify military action since. That AUMF reads, in part, quote, the president has the authority under the Constitution to take action to deter and prevent acts of international terrorism against the United States, end quote. Now, the post-9/11 AUMF does not authorize the use of force against anyone labeled a terrorist. It authorized military force specifically against al-Qaeda and the Taliban and has been used for actions against other Islamic militants such as ISIS. But it has never been interpreted to allow military force against the Iranian regime. And Congress has not approved, nor has Trump asked for, a new authorization for the use of military force for this Iranian military expedition. Joining us now is the Democratic Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania. She serves on the House Armed Services Committee and served in the United States Air Force. Congresswoman, thank you for being with us. This is a separate debate. I just want to be clear for our viewers. It's a separate debate as to whether or not Donald Trump should have attacked Iran. That's a debate for people to have. This is a question of who gets to decide when the United States goes to war. Again, it's maybe he just was tired, but the president did make a reference to war today.
Yeah, I think that those, and first of all, thanks for having me. I think those two questions or statements are interrelated. One is, what is the justification for this sort of action? And trust me, Iran is not a good actor on the world stage, is a danger. But what has changed is the question. Has anything changed that would authorize or allow the president to unilaterally make the action that he did? And I would argue, and I think it sounds like my colleagues across the aisle as well would argue, no, nothing has changed that would mean that he can act in the way that he did in an act of war as he described it. To work to try to destroy this regime. It just, all of it makes no sense. He did none of the things that were done in that war that you were referring to, in terms of going to the UN Security Council, in terms of going to the U.S. Congress and the Senate to ask for permission, in terms of having a coalition behind him to work through this. And instead, he's thrown our country and this world into chaos, which is clearly not what his supporters voted for, and certainly not something that will end up in a more secure country or a more secure world.
What can you do about this? I know I was talking to Congressman Ro Khanna. He and Congressman Thomas Massie had proposed a war powers resolution, which actually reads as follows. It says, Congress hereby directs the president to terminate the use of American states' armed forces from hostilities against the Islamic Republic of Iran or any part of its government or military unless explicitly authorized by a declaration of war or a special authorization of the use of military force against Iran. They introduced this on January 17th, and I understand that there was meant to be a vote on this on Tuesday in Congress.
Yes, I think this is one of those things that is also worth mentioning to the American people. Our speaker, the Speaker of the House, Mr. Johnson, has done everything he can to prevent us from having that kind of a vote. He canceled votes on Friday. He canceled votes on Tuesday. He canceled votes this coming Friday. And I think that's all in an attempt to undermine the power of Congress, to make sure that Congress has that authority. We can't do that if we're not physically present. And so I think that he is absolutely complicit in this neutering of the United States Congress. And I'm hopeful that we have the chance to take that vote. Unfortunately, we've had similar votes on things like Venezuela that have ended up in sort of a tie of sorts. And that seems to give the president in his mind, the authority to continue on with his lawlessness. And I hope that my Republican colleagues this time will do the right thing and vote for this resolution.
Are you fairly confident that your Democratic colleagues will do the right thing as well? I mean, people have had a couple of wars now in the last 20 plus years to think about and to realize that these things, they're not, and you know this, you're a veteran. These are not video game wars.
No, I believe, and I don't have any confirmation of this, but I have to believe that American lives may have already been lost here, that we know that lives of other countries have been lost as a consequence of these actions. No, this is not a game. And I do believe that my Democratic colleagues understand this, and history definitely is rhyming right now.
More and more people are speaking out against this. They're criticizing what they see as a Trump and Netanyahu's illegal war in Iran. They argue it violates international law and goes against any real commitment to peace. Many believe it's being done to distract from domestic and personal scandals both leaders are facing in their own countries. When polls are dropping, investigators are getting closer, and damaging files are spreading. What's one move some leaders make? They'll launch a military strike and hope it shifts the headlines. Of course, people will talk about the bombings, but they are not going to ignore the files either. Americans see what's happening. Even some of Trump's own supporters, I have seen right-leaning accounts on Twitter saying, "You really want to hide those files." To them, this bombing looks like an attempt to change the subject. And many military veterans and national security professionals are not supporting this move. It's not just in the United States. In Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney has publicly spotted the bombing, calling it justified. But many Canadians disagree with him as well. And it's important to understand that ordinary people, even those who don't support the Iranian government, still oppose these attacks. They don't believe this is about peace, human rights, freedom, or democracy. Because if it truly were about defending those values, critics argue Trump won't be accused of undermining freedom, human rights, and democratic norms at home.